no.
Now we are.
All right. And we are live for a second time. Welcome. Welcome everybody to today's webinar. Today we're gonna hike a little bit through some punch cards all the way through Copilots and talk a little bit about pro code and how pro code meets the low code area. I've been thinking a lot about this. Right now I'm actually in Europe. I love doing these like webinars from like weird, crazy places. I've been having a lot of time to think about, how this technology set is really evolving and what changes to be prepared for. So so today's our little journey and how we're going to fuse everything into one little seamless stack. For those of you that haven't listened to me or met me or had a chance to see some of my webinars. I'm Brian Haydin. I'm a solution architect here at Concurrency. I'm definitely an outdoor aficionado, an addict, if you will. And so whether I'm fishing Lake Michigan for salmon or landing an AI project in my net, I try to use these outdoor analogies and map things to things that people can understand. Picking the right gear and the right ecosystem. There's my QR code, a link to my LinkedIn. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, you want to chat about technology in general. This is something I'm just a nerd at heart. Fun little fact about me, I'm a twin. So you can see there's two of me in the top right. That's actually not two of me, it's my other half. So all right, so I'm going to start with the punchline here. Actually, two punchlines I've got. So I thought I'd do it a little bit differently and get to the closing argument and then walk you through my journey. So first point that I want to make is that I don't know if anybody's heard of fusion development or this terminology yet, and we'll get into some of the description of it, but the future is fusion development. I see that cross-functional teams are going to be not just in the agile sense of cross-functional teams with developers doing testing and testers doing, other aspects of it. I'm talking about the whole stack of fusion teams working together with business owners, with developers, citizen developers, and working with IT professionals like DevOps or security, SecOps, type of things. Think of them like a mixed party. Citizen devs are like the easy, kind of switchbacks. They kind of handle like most of those easier scenarios. But like if you get into something a little bit harder, like, a cliff wall, that's where like the pro devs are going to come in. And the other topic or the other point that I wanted to make is, are programming languages dead? I made this comment a couple of weeks ago at a talk that I was doing. And I've really started to think about this more. And the big names out there, like people that we all should know and respect, are blunt. The next programming language is going to be English. And so you can see the list of quotes here and how recent they've been made. But NVIDIA, our job is to create computing technology. And so nobody actually has to program. The language is human. The hottest new programming language is English. That's OpenAI x Tesla. AI may reduce the need for developers to code, possibly within the next 24 months, AWS. And then I put myself up there with the important people, but this is my prediction. Languages like traditional programming languages like Java and .NET will be niche skill sets. They're not going to be gone. But I think that they're going to be niche skill sets, just like you would think that how you would look at it with assembly, work today. It still exists. There's still use cases for it, but it's not something that people really do a lot in. So, that's where I kind of think the future is. And the rest of this talk is, well, the next probably 20 minutes of this talk is about why I got to that conclusion. And then we'll talk about how to apply some of this in like a real world scenario. But at the end of the day, English language is going to be the next programming language. Actually, it could be Latvian or it could be Polish too. So, but human language. So let's talk about how we're going to get there. So here's our trail map. I'm going to give you, we're going to do a little history lesson. I think it'd be kind of fun to look back at the last 80 years. And then I want to bring out the dictionary and make sure that we're all talking about, the same topics when we get to, so I'll do a little bit of that. Let's take a look at why I think that pro code and low code are converging. And we're going to do that by looking at Microsoft Stack and what they're actually doing in that ecosystem. And then for the last part, I'll go through like a scenario. It's got 3 stages to it. So 3 kind of, three use cases built on the same thing. And then we'll talk about like some of my key takeaways. In the meantime, if anybody has any questions, that you want me to answer, something like that, drop them in the chat, drop them in the Q&A. I like being ad hoc and getting good questions thrown at me. So, all right, so I've got a timeline here, and this is an 80-year timeline showing every sort of major milestone and abstraction layer. I was trying to build one of my own, and I found this article that I thought was pretty intuitive and laid this out, and actually did it much better with the graphics than I could. But all the way back into the 1940s, when we started having machine code, you can see that we've gone through assembly language, compilers, structured languages, object-oriented languages, that we started getting into component, type of development. And finally in the mid, 2010s, we started getting into these lower code environments, which I wasn't a real big fan of. But, at this point, I'm starting to, really have a lot of respect for the capabilities these things have, but there's still some isolated use cases where, or specialized use cases where I'd want to consider it. But key point here is that like software engineering has continuously been evolving into higher levels of abstraction, and that's been the progression. So where's that going to take us in the next 5 or 10 years? But in the early days of programming, it actually meant like things like flipping switches. Like a dude would take a wire from one box to another, and that was how programming was done. And so, I tried to imagine myself like being a software engineer, writing machine code, as if I was sitting at a breadboard, which I've, done some of that stuff too, but it's very tedious. It's very manual. It's a lot of like trial and error. You burn out some LED lights and switches and fuses along the way. And it becomes, it's almost like hacking your way through, the jungle with a machete. So along came assembly languages, so that offered a little bit of like mnemonic codes instead of binary. Wasn't as painstaking, but it was, it was a little bit better, than frying out some circuit boards. Every time you want to make a code change, you actually had something that you could persist. And so punch cards in assembly language, we started getting a little bit away from, those tools, directly with the hardware, like absolute hardware control. And then in the 1950s, 1960s, started to introduce languages like COBOL and Fortran, which are still around today, not so surprisingly, but somewhat surprisingly. And a little fun fact about myself, the first programming language I ever did, like in a real sense, was Fortran. That's where I got the bug to become a software engineer. But it wasn't in the 50s and 60s either. That was much later than that. But these languages came along to make it easier for software engineers to write in more human readable ways, so that they could think about solving the bigger problems rather than like direct registers. They're trying to solve the business problems. So if I was thinking about this like in like my wilderness analogy, we've got this bridge that we have to cross, and it's great because it gives us access to cross this big huge valley, but it's going to get me to the place where like that's closest to where I need to be, not to the exact place that I want to be. And that's what these higher level languages did. They gave you easy procedures and more compartmentalized code, that allowed you to focus on like the business things that you needed to do. But it didn't, it didn't quite get you to like some sort of nirvana. Object-oriented programming gets you a little bit closer. And with the rise of languages like C++ and Java, and ultimately like C#, that let us really just focus on the business layer and the business logic and not actually even having control over memory addresses. Well, in C++ maybe, but not like C# and Java. So we kind of got away from that. And again, like this layer of abstraction around the hardware allowed us to focus on business problems rather than focusing on the hardware itself. And then in 2015, the mid 2020, 2010s, I should say, we started to see some real investments and real opportunities in like low code platforms. And so using that same, like I'm trying to get, to this little mountaintop on the other side of this valley, kind of analogy. I don't really care that there's a bridge or not a bridge at the end of the day. Like I'm just saying I got to go there. And I'm going to have a shuttle that takes me there. It's not going to be, I'm still going over the bridge, but I'm sort of unaware that there's a bridge, it's taking me there. I'm just sort of on this journey or on this ride. And I have no real control over how it's going to be accomplished, but I don't need to have control of it. Just want to get on the other side of the valley. So in 2015, Power Apps, kind of came out. And we at Concurrency have been playing around with it since it started. And I found a lot of value, especially in things like Power Automate and being able to whip up some applications. But it's definitely nice to have the visual design and pre-built connectors. But there weren't a lot of connectors that were available at first. And it's integral. It's really ingrained into the Microsoft platform. And didn't have a lot of use outside of that. So if you're trying to build, something for consumers outside of your organization, it's probably still not the best tool. But back when it started, it really wasn't made for something like that. It's gotten a lot more mature, and especially after around 2020, it started taking on a lot more mainstream use cases. And today we're really, I'm really finding that most of my customers are doing some work in the Power Platform, maybe not in Power Apps, but definitely in Power Automate, and even in Copilot Studio to take advantage of some of the low code frameworks that are available to you. So what does that mean like in the future? So now we're starting to see copilots and agents and applied pretty evenly between like these pro code and low code environments. And so, these generative coding assistants, I think you're going to step in to help us and narrow that gap quite a bit. So we did this talk a couple of weeks ago about using the Power Platform plan to build applications just using business requirements and natural language. And then we also did another one talking about Copilot agents and more GitHub Copilot agents, and talking about how we can use natural language to instruct software engineering tasks or software engineering agents to be able to go out and do code for us. So I think that those two things are going to converge pretty quickly. And we're just going to be talking to some sort of a software development agent, and it's going to go and figure out what's the appropriate tool set it needs to use in order to accomplish its goal. So here, like in this, analogy, I'm not even aware that there's a valley. I just needed to go someplace, and I'm telling my AI assistant, I need to go to this mountain, and I walk through some magical little portal to get there. Thought it was kind of like, an interesting way to look at it. But I do see that, this is kind of the next step in software engineering is going to displace like all this structured code and allow us to just basically say, here's the problem I'm trying to solve, and here's the rules that I need you to adhere to, and have it write the computer instructions that are necessary in order for a user to be able to accomplish those goals. And why I've really started to believe this is looking back at all these different abstractions that have been put onto it and put onto it. We're slowly getting away from any kind of understanding of how the computer necessarily has to work and just saying this is what the system is that I need to look like. And I see that, getting rid of structured language as a barrier to some of the things that you might want to do is probably the next step that's going to come along. So I said we're going to do a little dictionary exercise too. So I want to make sure that we're all talking the same language for a little bit. And so I've got a couple of things that we'll define. We've got this idea of pro code and low code. I've dropped those two words out there a little bit. So let's first off just quantify what I mean by pro code. So by pro code, I'm talking about traditional software, development, .NET, C#, Java, Python, JavaScript. These are all programming languages that are what I would consider the professional programmer's toolkit. Typically requires an advanced degree, or at least some sort of a training degree, I should say. Pros and cons to it are that I've got full control over the development ecosystem. If I want to do something that's crazy, I go and either find a third-party library that does it for me, or I create another library for myself. I can control the performance, by refactoring my own code or making decisions around, hardware, I guess, if you want to think of it that way, like that might allow me to do things more performant. And generally speaking, when I do things in a pro code, I'm actually defining containers that I'm going to deploy so I can build a much more scalable system in that case. The cons are it's definitely more time consuming for you to build it. And you can't just have Johnny off the street come in and write these kind of codes. Overall, you're going to spend a little bit more time. It's your code, you built it. So if it breaks, you fix it. A lot more maintenance costs. And let's compare that to the low code. So in low code, I'm talking about things like Power Apps, whether that's Power Pages or traditional like Power Apps, apps, things like that. Power Automate, Copilot Studios in that same story. I would look at Dataverse as being something that is definitely a lower code, kind of tool, and then Power BI as well. The nice part about these, very, very fast delivery mechanism. I can spin up an entire app in a couple of hours. Add some business rules. And nowadays, I don't even really have to have a lot of understanding how the ecosystem works. I just have to have access, and I can type in some instructions and it'll build it out for me. And it's great for that kind of like rapid prototyping, building internal applications. Some of the cons, you're more or less dependent on the connectors in the Power Platform that are available to you. You can create custom connectors, but that's typically now you're bridging into the pro code, and we're going to get into that. But you're kind of limited there. It does have it's more limited in the ways that you can control the performance. And it's basically, I need more performance. I'm going to have to buy more capacity. I'm going to have to buy more SKUs. But I don't really have the ability to distribute it across multiple workload or multiple containers like it would in the pro code environment. So, kind of pro and a con. I don't have to manage hardware, but I also can't manage hardware to get performance. And then, the last part about it is like this application sprawl, in the Power Platform. And we're seeing quite a bit of discussion around this with organizations right now. And it reminds me back in like the mid 2000s when everybody was building Access databases to solve some sort of a business problem. And this one client that I was working at the time, is funny little story, had an initiative to go out and clean up all of the Access databases within the organization, like full stop, no more no more shadow IT, shadow applications. We're cleaning all that stuff out. And then probably about 3 or 4 months after they got done cleaning all this up, they had an initiative to find efficiencies. And the person that won this little challenge that they had actually created a new Access database app and so the sprawl, started over again. But that does happen, and there's strategies that we're coaching customers through to help with this application sprawl in the low-code environment. But it shouldn't prevent you from encouraging your employees to solve business problems on their own. It's just about how and what environments are you going to let them use to solve which types of problems. So best time for pro code, best time for low code. I think if you want to do some rapid prototyping, and it's going to be kind of internal only, definitely I would start with the low code, find out what your limitations are going to be, and then invite pro code into it. And then, for pro code, if you really are going to be doing some sort of deeper, like really out there, new cutting edge technology, you're probably going to land in the pro code to begin with. So that's a good use case for it. Very complex, very scalable systems. Anytime you're going to be working with external customers directly, I would say is, you're going to want to consider the pro code environment. But those are some of the sort of decision points. And the other thing I talked about was fusion development. So I want to make sure that I talk a little bit about this. Not a really common terminology yet. And it's not really a theory, it's a strategy around people. So it is kind of an extension of agile development where we've added citizen developers and pro developers into, our toolbox or our team composition. And so our core personas, for a Fusion team is really going to be the citizen developer doing business apps. That could be Power Automate, that could be Power BI, could be Power Apps. And pro developers that are going to be doing some of the more advanced things like data factory jobs or Azure functions, building APIs that the custom connectors can't, that are the custom connectors are going to have to leverage. Those types of workloads that are going to support these different use cases that we want to build. And then we're not losing IT out of any of this. They're still going to help us secure and govern our environments. And help us make sure that we can keep the application lights on and running. So they're important as well. And then I added the business owners here as well, because I think there's, when you think about an analyst, a citizen developer is probably going to be somebody at an analyst level, developing in a low code environment without a lot of like software engineering background. But the business owner, there's still people there that know the systems inside and out. And more importantly, they're people that are going to be able to make decisions about how a new system or a new thing should work. So these like 4 different personas are all going to work together to work in a multidisciplinary, kind of collaboration. Everybody's pitching in, pro code's doing low code's doing pro code. And they're going to leverage each other's like expertise in order to fulfill some sort of shared goal for the organization. And without any like real predisposition to using Power Platform or Azure, as a deployment mechanism. So I think we got those definitions, and I want to talk a little bit about the Microsoft stack as well before we get into, our last little kind of ideation and what it would look like in the real world. So so Microsoft Stack's kind of changed over the last couple of years, especially over the last couple of years. And in like 2020, so just like 5 years ago, if you wanted to do development, you had to make the choice kind of at the beginning. And it was like, am I going to do low code or am I going to do pro code? There were some overlaps because this idea of connectors and APIs have always been there. But we're going to talk about a couple of like more advanced things where those integrations that overlap is getting a lot cleaner. But you really kind of had to make that choice. And once you made it, you were sort of like there, like you weren't going to go back. It would just be a complete rework to switch from pro code to low code. Today, though, like you could start in either place, and you could migrate certain components to it pretty seamlessly by just having the good practices we typically do today in software development. So I could leave my front end, in Power Platform and kind of convert things to more of a service-oriented architecture using, APIs, or vice versa. I could just, want to do something in a more advanced front end because I get better customer facing, kind of actions, but leverage the power of like low code, ecosystems, to do some of the business logic as well. So you don't have to like choose anymore. You can kind of like mix and match if you want to. And so to help you sort of understand that, like the new Microsoft Dev Stack is like the whole toolkit, like layer by layer, it's everything. So at the application, I'm not just doing app services and front door. I'm using the Power Platform, Copilot Studio, Power Pages, Power Apps as like my application layer. And I don't even really have to care about too much about the data either, because we're starting to extract a lot of that. And a good example of that is Microsoft Fabric. Fabric supports all sorts of different database types now, with SQL databases, Cosmos databases as native components of Fabric, but still having kind of a unified system, be able to track and interact with that information. We're starting to see like this data layer abstract quite a bit as well. And then from a logic perspective, I've already touched base on this, that we could use logic apps, we could use Azure functions, Power Automate. These are all sort of built in the same infrastructure and underlying components. And so the icons from the pro code and the low code, they're more or less like, interchangeable, and kind of proof that these silos are kind of gone, that we can make these decisions and play with them. And so how do I know that that's the case? So this is, some of the latest like drops from Microsoft over the last, 4 or 5 months. Some of these were at build, agent orchestration in Copilot Studio. Haven't been able to play around with it yet since still in private preview, but you can wire up Copilot agents to agents, and some of those agents could be in AI Foundry, and some of them could be native in Copilot Studio, but you can connect all these different agents. You also had the ability to develop your own models or decide and pick and choose which models you want to use. So in the Power Platform, you can now bring your own models and fine tune them in Azure AI Foundry, so that they apply really directly to your use cases. Those agents can now be used inside of Power BI. So we're having a lot more ability to be able to chat with your data. The pricing model has changed a little bit more towards that consumption model that you would see similarly like in Azure around token counts from Power BI. So you're seeing a lot of these, like, doesn't really matter if you're in the Power Platform or in Azure. Things are starting to work a little bit more cohesively. And kind of like an epiphany for me was when I was at Microsoft Build talking with the Logic Apps group. And they had this like agent builder inside of Logic Apps, and they could add these different components, and the naming conventions for all these different components seemed really similar to the pro code environment, like semantic kernel. And I was like, hey, like, what are you guys doing in the back here? Like, is that just semantic kernel that you put a front end over? And they're like, yeah, you got us. Like, that's pretty much what they're doing. So a lot of these different tools in Azure are just being built on the same components that the low code tools are being built on, and that's bringing this all together. So some further thoughts here. Power Platform's not just for the kids table anymore. It's made for the grown-ups as well. So you're getting the same support for DevOps, you're getting the same support for governance, and the result is basically that the pro code assets, like Azure functions and models, can be exposed to the low code makers as well, not only easily but in a governed way as well. So some things that that make me believe that Power Platform is being elevated to that first-class citizen. Really direct, concrete examples: Power Automate actions for Azure services. So you can start to interact with these Azure services, directly through Power Automate. I mentioned kind of like logic apps integration, the way that's working with agents. You can integrate logic apps directly with the Power Platform as well. So we're getting into this like world where I can develop something in Azure, use it in Power Platform, and vice versa. And API management, that's matured quite a bit. We haven't done, I haven't talked about this in a little bit, but APM is, has always been something that's been directly connected to the Power Platform. And we're seeing it make more available to people that have implemented APM as well. All right, it's been a lot here. Need some water. So let's talk about a use case. We're gonna do three different scenarios, and they're going to be an evolution off this first one. So I wanted to think of an idea that was pretty ubiquitous and be industry agnostic. And so HR is one of these things that keeps coming up a lot. And so vacation requests, here I'm out of the country right now. I need to take some time off. I want to have an easy way for, to be able to do that. And for a lot of smaller businesses, they may not have like a really robust, time off, application or, ADP or something like that to be able to manage it. So let's go ahead and let's think about like what we would do and how we would apply this Fusion team to this problem. So basically employee needs to submit time off requests and managers have to have the ability to approve them or reject them. And HR needs to have access to all the records so that they can pay their time off, type of thing. So solution I want to outline here is basically we're going to build this in a Microsoft Power App, a Canvas app specifically. That's going to allow us to build like a really simple, form, hopefully within a couple hours, and hook it up to Power Automate to handle the approval requests. I can deploy this directly into Teams, which you're seeing in the screenshot. So the vacation request is pretty much up and running in a day, and I don't have to write any code in order to do that. So how would we do it? First thing you're going to do is you're going to set up the data. Here we're going to create like a SharePoint list, or we could do a Dataverse table. Dataverse table would probably be my first choice if I have that available to me as a decision to be made, because it gives me more options later on down the road as this application is likely going to mature. But then in the app, I'm going to choose a Canvas app template. I can connect it to that data, and it already has an understanding of what that data is and can auto-generate a screen for me complete with some of the validation that I might not have to worry about building out myself. So, but even if I have to, I can use, basically Power FX to build like Excel, kind of similar to Excel expressions, but they're not like code. It's just basically like little formulas that you're creating. And then Power Automate, for those that haven't used it, it's also kind of a drag and drop. I want to, if this, if somebody does this action, I want it to do this thing. And we're gonna spin that up and have it do the approvals for that. In our particular scenario here, if a manager, if somebody submits a PTO request, the manager's going to get an approval update, Teams notification. Hopefully they just click a button to say approve, like you see on the screen, and then it's all good to go. And how this gets split up across the Fusion team, a lot of words on the screen, but there's tasks for everybody in this, even though it's a low code solution at first. We can even have our pro code developers, involved and engaged in performing certain functions here. Obviously, our business process business process owner function, they got to define the KPIs, how this is supposed to work. This is probably your HR manager. But that HR manager probably has, somebody working for them that manages the data and, keeps track of this stuff. They're perfect candidate to do some of this low code environment. And with just a little bit of training and coaching, they can spin up, the wireframes and Power Apps and within the studio and, connect it to the data that needs to be done. Pro developer, it's kind of like, debatable how much they're going to be engaged. It's going to be pretty minimal, in this particular use case. But, they're the person that probably would say, hey, like I wouldn't use the SharePoint list. I would use like a Dataverse table if at all possible, because I have a feeling that the next thing that we're going to do is stub out like some sort of a custom connector to get to the HR data that they use, and maybe it's ADP or something like that. And then we definitely have, our IT team, involved, making sure that like DLP policies are in place and that we're doing security controls, especially when we start talking about people's money and payments and stuff. So step two here, or wait, actually, let's talk about like the value proposition here. So this basic use case, it just shows that like low code has, speed and agility on its side. I can get something up to solve like a relatively, I don't know if it's common-ish, kind of like a business problem without a tremendous amount of effort, on the development team. But I also didn't require a developer to do it. Didn't have to go to IT to have them build something out for me. I could have analysts do it, and I don't have to deploy assets to Azure, so I don't have to worry about like Azure consumption or how do I configure this. And it's a public cloud, and that's all my data and stuff like that. It's all taken care of as part of the Power Platform system and the ecosystem. We get all that data governance and support that way. Most organizations are going to have access to Microsoft Teams and SharePoint anyway. So this is a very feasible project for somebody to do in a day to go ahead and play with. But that's not the end of this application, because just submitting approvals isn't super useful because people can't leverage out of the other pieces of information that might correlate with that or even like report off of it really easily. So our requirements are going to grow, and we want to make sure that we can integrate this into other systems and be able to look at that data. So use case number two, we want to make a unified data platform. We want to make sure that this information is being used across the ecosystem and has consistency. So same vacation data, but instead of it being in Dataverse exclusively, we're going to start leveraging Microsoft Fabric, and that gives us the ability to use not just that data that we're storing in Dataverse or SharePoint lists, but also in Microsoft, like for our analytics, we can like pull it together with HR data. We'll have a little bit more robust data pipeline, so we'll be using a Lakehouse and a Power BI dashboard. And as a little, as a little bit of a value add, we can look out for our managers and say, hey, look, 30% of your team is going to be on PTO next week. You might want to think about that before you approve this. So we can do that through like data activator triggers in Microsoft Fabric. So what would this actually look like, if I was going to build this? So we're going to move our data into Fabric. Dataverse is direct integration. It's kind of like a copy, not really a move. But we, would pull information from a couple other sources as well and bring it all together in our Lakehouse. And then we can enrich that data and consolidate it into a single view, certify those data sets, and expose those to the application, itself as a more cohesive thing. Obviously, we want to build some of these reports. You can see that, a nice little heat map about what my coverage is. Am I going to have outage, an outage window that I have to worry about if I approve this? And then be able to do some more advanced automations. Like you see, like the 30% of the engineering is out next sprint. Let's come up with an action plan or an alert plan to make sure that that the managers are aware of that. Still within the Microsoft apps, Teams apps. We're not changing any of that. We're just adding a couple of features. Most of the application doesn't really change, just a new screen. But how does this break down into our Fusion team responsibilities? Well, pretty much the same team. I split out our pro developers into like maybe two different like subsets of pro developers. We've got our data engineering and we've got like our application stuff, because we're going to be building out some custom APIs, for our connections to that data. And then, a lot of developers like pro code developers in the .NET world may be a little bit unfamiliar with Data Factory. So, probably need a couple of different individuals there. But everybody else has sort of like the same responsibilities. The citizen developers, still the HR analyst. They're the one that are helping to, build out the screens in a low code environment. And we do see that our DevOps engineers get a little bit more involved as we've got more components we have to manage. And so we're probably going to bring in things like Purview to manage the data as well. So I think the real value proposition in incorporating the data, lower code data aspects of this and pro code data aspects is that we give ourselves more real-time insight capabilities. People have like a single source of where they can go and manage their information. And this demonstrates that I can blend some of these pro code things like analytics cubes or custom connectors to an HR information system and have a robust solution that's still predominantly low code, but gives me the flexibility to leverage other systems that previously wouldn't have been capable in a Power Platform. So, however, still not perfect. People are using it today, and they're kind of happy with it, but people are still hunting around for answers, and they get pinged with a lot of those like approved notifications in Teams, and they're wondering what you can do to simplify things even a little bit further. So, stage 3 is let's do something with to make this a little bit more of an intuitive, interface. So they still have to, they still have to ask for information like, do I have 5 days left, or like who's covering support for next week? And all this is information that's available, and there's ways for us to access it. We just need to give the application the ability to do that. So in this solution, what we're going to do is we're going to turn this more into a Teams bot. We still have the application, but and all these functions still, are going to be reused, but we're going to allow them to have a conversational experience to be able to interact with this information. And since it's hooked up to Fabric, we can ask information about that data as well. So, what would that look like? I think there's a little bit more, scoping and design, that needs to go into this. As we start getting into more advanced functions and different use cases that, especially in a conversational mode, might be a little bit unpredictable. And we're going to have to make sure that it's a lot more secure because we don't want people looking up other people's PTO balances and that type of stuff. So, but we're still going to low code this as much as possible. I think Copilot Studio comes into play pretty well, and we'll have to build in a few additional custom integrations to support this as well. And as you can see that the Fusion team, their responsibilities, they're a little bit more complex, but I haven't added anybody else here. We still have our HR director, our HR analyst, and our pro code developers. Maybe it's a different skill set, so maybe it's a different person that has the mindset for ChatGPT type of workloads, but essentially kind of the same thing. So hope that gives you a really good understanding of what these solutions might look like. So I'm going to start to wrap this up a little bit. Some lessons learned on this. Speed, depth, acceleration, that's kind of like where my head's at. Some of the solutions that we're building today, a lot of the solutions that we're building today are a low code first, an analyst type of workloads. And I'm looking at the speed of getting something in our customers' hands to be able to see the value quicker. So speed is definitely important there, but we run into some hiccups where we can't quite get the performance that we need. And so when we need depth, we're going to bring the pro code into it. And from an acceleration standpoint, AI can really accelerate the pace that you can develop in. And it's changing month by month, the capabilities. Earlier this year, not being able to hand off a user story to a GitHub Copilot agent, or using the Teams planner to be able to build an application. These are all things that have happened, in the last 6 months and are going to continue to accelerate. But by adopting a Fusion team strategy where you're considering and working with low code as a key skill set, on these Fusion teams, I'm predicting that you're going to see up to 10x faster delivery times without necessarily sacrificing quality. And the trick is just to know when to use low code and when to work with pro code. And keep in mind, the governance is going to be even more important as we start getting into these lower code type of toolkits. So Microsoft Purview has a lot of great features that are supporting this sort of hybrid Fusion aspect as well. So what can you do? I recommend that everybody in this call probably consider taking these 4 steps. Work with your organization to launch some sort of a pilot Fusion project. Start small, see how it works for you, see what kind of skill sets that you have, internally to be able to support some of these things. Come up with a training plan, a scaling plan for your team as well. These are all new technologies and you need to stay on top of it, but helping them, helping turn analysts into makers is something that you should definitely start thinking about. And AI being a huge component of accelerating the development time, just make sure you're using it responsibly. It is definitely wild west out there. And start looking at ways that you can make sure that you're mitigating data loss, for the organization, and enforce the right kind of environment structure within your Power Platform environment. Need help with any of that? Concurrency's done quite a bit of these, not only projects, but governance type of aspects as well. So embrace low code for speed, invest in pro code foundations, watch AI like a hawk, just stay on top of it, and learn the tools that are in the governance tool belt. To me, these are the key, kind of thoughts that I would leave you with. I'm not going to read everything that's on the screen, but been talking for quite a bit. I don't know if there's any questions in the chat. All right, I don't see any questions in the chat. So final little slide here is next steps, for us, to be able to help you. Concurrency would love to be a part of the journey. So Amy had dropped in a link to a brief survey. If you want a follow-up with us, that's a great opportunity for you to let us know that you're interested in talking about something a little bit more. But most importantly, I'd love to get your feedback on what you thought of this webinar. If I met the expectations, things that I can improve, if you were looking to get something else out of this as well. But in terms of next steps, if you need some sort of a guide or a Sherpa to help you out, we can help you with a use case discovery session, helping you evaluate, is this an appropriate Fusion business case, where we would recommend, a Fusion team attack this. If you are looking for some sort of a Power Platform envisioning session, I don't know where to get started, can Concurrency help us figure out some of those areas? We'd love to help you out there too. We can do an envisioning session. Governance readiness review is something that we've been doing quite a bit this year. As people start to adopt AI, is it safe for us to use it? Do we have the right guardrails in place? What's our exposure if we turn some of these things on? And finally, if you really want to dive deeper into just the AI, aspect of it, our executive AI envisioning sessions are somewhere that we typically get started. And this mostly revolves around getting buy-in from the organization that AI is a strategic initiative that they want to undertake. So that being said, thanks everybody for joining today, and I look forward to hearing your comments.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Amy.